In the opulent halls of the Nebula Pavilion, where crystalline chandeliers cast ethereal glows upon swirling gowns of iridescent silk and tailored void suits, Elowen Sariel stood frozen, her gloved hand clasped firmly by a wide-eyed child whose tear-streaked face bespoke abandonment amid the revelry. The Archduke Thorn Casimir, his silver-streaked hair framing a visage of stern nobility, loomed in the doorway, his storm-gray eyes narrowing in suspicion as the crowd's murmurs swelled like a gathering tempest, accusations of scheming entanglement threatening to unravel her carefully guarded solitude. Too late, she realized, for the child's desperate grip had already sealed their fates in a web of scandal and unforeseen alliance. If this moment of fragile connection amid looming peril gripped you, hit subscribe now, because the revelations ahead will shatter everything, pulling you deeper into a cosmos of passion and peril. The Nebula Pavilion shimmered under the artificial auroras of the Andromeda Sector's grandest orbital station, a sprawling citadel of alloyed spires and holographic gardens where the elite of a dozen star systems converged for the annual celestial accord. Amid the whirl of diplomats in flowing capes embroidered with constellation motifs and merchants cloaked in shimmering void silk, Elowen Sariel lingered near a cluster of bioluminescent ferns, her auburn tresses coiled in a defiant updo that caught the prismatic lights, her posture a blend of poised elegance and underlying tension, as if bracing against an invisible gale. She had come not for alliances or revelry, but to observe the fragile threads of interstellar politics, her sharp intellect her only armor in a galaxy that had long dismissed her as an unaligned scholar, too forthright for the marriage markets and too independent for patronage. Yet tonight, fate twisted like a rogue comet's path. Slipping through a concealed alcove to escape the suffocating gaze of judgmental matrons, who whispered of her particular nature, her refusal of suitors who saw her as mere ornament, Elowen stumbled upon a small figure huddled in the shadows. The girl, no more than 6 cycles old, with wide obsidian eyes and a gown of starry velvet now rumpled and tear-dampened, clutched a forgotten glow orb that flickered like a dying sun. "Please," the child whispered, her voice a fragile echo in the dim alcove, "don't let them find me alone. The lights are too bright, and grandmother forgot me again." Elowen's heart, long guarded behind walls of scholarly detachment, cracked at the sight. The girl's posture mirrored her own childhood isolation, abandoned amid familial expectations that crushed rather than nurtured. Without hesitation, Elowen knelt, her own gown pooling like spilled mercury on the polished deck. "Hush now, little one," she murmured, extending a gloved hand. "We'll count the stars backward until the storm passes. 10,000, 9,999. The child's fingers intertwined with hers, small and trusting, as if Elowen were a lifeline in the void. They sat there, breaths synchronizing, the distant hum of orchestral synth harmonies filtering through like a siren's call. But tranquility shattered when the alcove door hissed open, revealing a towering figure in imperial regalia, Archduke Thorn Casimir, his silver-streaked locks framing a face etched with aristocratic severity, his storm-gray eyes flashing accusation. "What scheme is this?" he demanded, his voice a low thunder that reverberated through the station's recycled air. The child, his daughter Mirai, clung tighter, whispering, "Papa, she helped me." She stayed. In that instant, as murmurs from the nearby hall swelled into scandalous whispers, eyes peering through the alcove's translucent panels, Elowen realized the peril. Association with a reclusive archduke, shadowed by rumors of his late consort's betrayals and his own withdrawn exile, could brand her a fortune-seeker or worse. Yet pulling away meant abandoning the girl to her fears, echoing Elowen's own unhealed wounds. The Archduke stepped closer, his presence commanding the space like a gravitational pull, his gloved hand hovering as if deciding between protection and dismissal. Tension coiled in Elowen's chest, her defiant gaze meeting his vulnerability clashing with resolve in a silent standoff that could redefine their orbits forever. What would you do in this moment of unexpected vulnerability, caught between compassion and consequence? Comment below and share your thoughts. Elowen Sariel had always navigated the stars with the precision of a cartographer mapping uncharted nebulae, her life a solitary voyage through the vast expanse of the galactic Concord. Born on the fringe world of Zephyr Prime, where dust storms whispered ancient secrets and her family's modest archive of linguistic artifacts barely sustained them, she had risen through sheer intellect, deciphering forgotten dialects that unlocked trade routes and alliances for the elite. Yet success came at a cost. 3 cycles of fruitless introductions in the marriage circuits had branded her unyielding, her sharp retorts to leering suitors earning her isolation rather than companionship. "You're too much like the tempests of home," her brother had once said, before retreating to his own secure union, leaving Elowen to fend for herself in the cold hierarchies of the core worlds. Her closest confidant, Nalani Vassar, a serene medic with olive skin and a limp from a childhood shuttle mishap, had been her anchor through it all. "Society sees your strength as a threat," Nalani had murmured earlier that evening, as they prepared for the summit in a modest antechamber aboard Elowen's chartered vessel. Nalani's gentle hands adjusted Elowen's gown, the fabric a subtle weave of zephyr silk that caught light like distant quasars, accentuating her auburn coils and the pearl earring that dangled like a captured moon. "But I see a woman who deserves more than their shallow orbits." Elowen had smiled faintly, masking the ache of unspoken fears. Abandonment by her parents' early deaths in a mining collapse, the wound that made her build barriers against intimacy, lest she be left adrift once more. Now, as the alcove confrontation unfolded, those foundations trembled. The Archduke's initial fury softened fractionally upon seeing Marai's eased expression, her small frame no longer quaking. "Explain yourself," he commanded, though his tone held a sliver of curiosity beneath the steel. Elowen rose slowly, her posture unbowed, meeting his gaze with a quiet defiance that had carried her through countless negotiations. "Your daughter was alone, overwhelmed by the crowd's clamor. I offered solace, nothing more, no scheme, no ambition." Marai nodded vigorously, her obsidian eyes pleading. "She counted the stars with me, Papa. Like you used to before everything." Thorne's jaw tightened, a flicker of pain crossing his features, remnants of his consort's scandalous defection to a rival faction, her flight ending in a catastrophic warp jump accident that left him scarred and society whispering of his inadequacies. He had retreated to his fortress asteroid, raising Marai in seclusion, his heart encased in layers of distrust. Yet here was this stranger, Elowen, piercing those defenses with simple kindness. "Altruism is rare in these halls," he said, his voice a measured rumble. "What do you seek in return?" Elowen's response came unfiltered, her internal wound fueling honesty. "Nothing but to ensure no child endures the isolation I once knew." The words hung, bridging their hidden pains, her fear of rejection, his of betrayal, planting seeds of reluctant intrigue. As servants ushered them back toward the main pavilion, whispers already circulating like rogue data streams, Elowen felt Nalani's concerned gaze from across the room. The medic approached later, pulling her aside amid the holographic displays of swirling galaxies. "That was the Archduke. Rumors say his mother schemes to remarry him for alliances. Be cautious. Scandal clings to him like dark matter." Elowen nodded, but inside desire stirred, not for power, but for connection, a family to heal her solitude. Fears loomed too, the risk of entanglement pulling her into political voids. Secrets simmered, her own untranslated artifact, a relic hinting at lost empires, could append balances if revealed. For now she watched Thorne guide Marai away, the child's backward glance a silent plea, forging an invisible tether that promised upheaval. The celestial accords crescendo built like a supernova's flare, the pavilion alive with the hum of anti-grav dancers and the clink of crystalline goblets filled with nebula-infused elixirs. Elowen had retreated to a shadowed balcony overlooking the station's docking bays, where freighters glided like silent phantoms against the starfield, seeking respite from the growing murmurs. Her encounter with Marai and the Archduke had ignited whispers, speculation that she, the unaligned linguist, had orchestrated a ploy to infiltrate noble circles. Nalani joined her, her limp more pronounced after hours on her feet, pressing a datapad into Elowen's hand. Reports are spreading. They're calling it a clandestine rendezvous. Your reputation. It could shatter like brittle asteroid ice. Before Elowen could respond, a figure emerged from the throng. Vespera Draken, the Dowager Archmatron, Thorn's mother, her ebony robes swirling like a black hole's event horizon, her lined face a mask of calculated benevolence. "Miss Sariel," Vespera purred, her voice laced with synthetic warmth from vocal implants. "You've made quite an impression on my granddaughter, and it seems my son." Elowen's posture stiffened, sensing the trap. Vespera's reputation for manipulating alliances was legendary, her own consort's death leaving her hungry for control over the Casimir dynasty. "I merely comforted a distressed child," Elowen replied, her tone even, though internally her wound flared, memories of her mother's dismissive abandonment echoing in Vespera's assessing gaze. The inciting spark ignited when Mirai burst onto the balcony, evading her attendants, her small hands clutching Elowen's skirts. "Don't go," she pleaded, eyes wide with the raw fear of loss. "Grandmother says Papa needs someone, but the others always leave." Thorn followed swiftly, his presence commanding silence. Vespera seized the moment, her eyes gleaming. "See, Sebastian, Thorn dear, this woman has bonded with Mirai in ways no other has. Perhaps fate aligns our orbits." The Archduke's storm-gray eyes met Elowen's, a flicker of reluctant spark igniting, attraction born of shared vulnerability, his guarded heart recognizing her unyielding strength. But scandal erupted. Onlookers from the pavilion peered through the balcony's force field, holographic recorders capturing the intimate scene. Whispers escalated to accusations. Elowen painted as a schemer exploiting the child's innocence to ensnare the reclusive Archduke. Vespera smiled thinly, whispering to Thorn, "Escort her away, or the rumors will consume us all." Forced into proximity, Thorn offered his arm, his touch sending an electric shiver through Elowen, a romantic ember amid the chaos. As they navigated the crowd Mirai between them, Elowen made her decision. She would not flee, drawn by the child's plea and the Archduke's hidden depths. Yet fears mounted. Her untranslated relic could be weaponized in this game, and Thorn's past betrayals mirrored her own dread of intimacy. Shock rippled through her as Vespera murmured, "This could be your salvation, or ruin." Determination solidified. Elowen would face the storm, her heart awakening to possibilities she had long denied. Weeks blurred into a tapestry of interstellar transits and shadowed correspondences as Elowen found herself drawn deeper into the Casimir orbit. An invitation arrived via encrypted holopulse to the Archduke's fortress asteroid, Ebonreach, a colossal bastion carved from a rogue planetoid, its crystalline domes overlooking swirling gas giants. Vespera had orchestrated it, framing the visit as a fortnight's acquaintance to quell rumors, but Elowen sensed the undercurrents, a test of her suitability amid brewing custody whispers from rival clans eyeing Mirai as a political pawn. Nalani warned her aboard the shuttle, "This is no sanctuary, Vespera's webs ensnare the unwary." Yet Elowen boarded, her gown packed alongside her linguistic tomes, driven by Mirai's pleading messages and an inexplicable pull toward Thorn's enigmatic aura. Upon arrival, Ebonreach revealed its melancholic beauty, echoing halls lined with holographic archives of lost worlds, gardens of engineered flora blooming under artificial suns, yet tinged with neglect, overgrown vines symbolizing Thorn's withdrawal since his consort's betrayal. Mirai greeted her with unbridled joy, tugging her through corridors to a tower observatory where telescopes pierced the void. "Look, the Veil Nebula. Papa says it's where stars are born," the child exclaimed, her obsidian eyes alight. They spent mornings exploring, Elowen teaching Mirai ancient runes that danced like fireflies on data slates, forging a bond that eased the girl's nightmares of abandonment. Obstacles arose, Vespera's pointed tease, probing Elowen's unconventional past, hinting at her as a mere stabilizing influence for Thorn's fractured legacy. Tensions rose as Elowen encountered Thorn in the archives, their conversations evolving from wary exchanges to intellectual sparring, debating galactic ethics, her sharp insights challenging his cynicism. A red herring emerged when a forged message suggested Elowen harbored ambitions for his title, planted by Vespera's subtle machinations, straining their budding trust. Yet growth bloomed. During a shared vigil over Marai's feverish sleep, caused by a minor viral strain, Thorn confessed fragments of his pain, his hand brushing Elowen's ingratitude. Hope flickered amid frustration. Elowen's internal wound softened, her fear of rejection clashing with emerging affection. Subplots intertwined. Her relic secrets hinted at a forgotten alliance that could aid Thorn's house, while custody rumors escalated, Vespera whispering of necessary introductions to other suitors. The rising strain peaked in a private confrontation, Thorn's storm-gray eyes searching hers under the observatory's starlight. "You unsettle me, Elowen. Your kindness pierces where others falter." She retorted with honesty, "And you awaken what I thought lost, the courage to connect." Bonds deepened, but intrigue loomed, Vespera's allies circling, testing Elowen's resolve in this cosmic dance of hearts and hazards. Would you trust a fragile alliance amid such rising shadows? Share your thoughts in the comments. The fortress asteroid known as Aegis Prime drifted in sovereign silence at the edge of the Concorde's inner systems, its colossal mass anchored by gravity wells and ancient reactor vanes that glowed like a buried heart. Within its deepest level, the core chamber, power hummed with a low, omnipresent resonance, a sound so constant it ceased to be noise and became atmosphere. This was where Thorn Casimir came when the weight of command pressed too heavily upon his spine. Holomaps bloomed before him in layered constellations of light, contested star lanes marked in amber, volatile borders pulsing red, Concorde fleets represented by disciplined blue vectors. His long fingers traced a familiar route through the Virex corridor, jaw tightening as probability models recalculated for the 100th time. Peace here was not maintained by hope, but by vigilance sharpened to a blade. He had ruled too long to believe otherwise. Thorn exhaled slowly, dragging a hand through silver-streaked hair that had not been trimmed in weeks. Fatigue clung to him in ways no uniform could hide. The guardianship of the Concorde of Marai had hollowed him, and tonight, the chamber felt less like a command sanctum and more like a confessional he had never intended to open. The chamber doors parted with a soft hydraulic sigh. He did not turn. "Leave," he said, voice calm, automatic. "I requested solitude." The footsteps did not retreat. Instead they advanced, measured, resolute, unmistakably hers. Thorn looked up sharply as Elowen stepped into the glow of the holomaps, light scattering across her dark curls and the relic pendant she always wore, its alien sigils faintly luminescent in the reactor's pulse. She had changed from the formal silks Vespera favored, choosing instead a simple tunic, practical, unadorned, unmistakably her. "You shouldn't be here," he said again, more softly now. "I know," Elowen replied. "That's why I came." She stopped a few paces away, the chamber's hum wrapping around them like a held breath. Thorn dismissed the maps with a flick of his wrist, the light dissolving into shadow. Without the projections between them, the distance felt suddenly intimate, unguarded. "Elowen," he began, but she raised a hand, not to silence him, but to steady herself. "Marai told me something today," she said. "During our rune lesson." His chest tightened. "She said you hide here when your grandmother argues about finding you another consort," Elowen continued. "She said they all smiled, and none of them meant it." The words landed with surgical precision. Thorn turned away, gaze fixed on the reactor core behind its containment field. "Marai talks too much." "She talks because she's afraid," Elowen said gently. "So am I." That made him face her. Her amber eyes were unwavering now, no trace of the careful politeness she'd worn when she first arrived at Aegis Prime. This was the woman who debated him until dawn over governance ethics, who challenged his assumptions, who laughed, rare, unguarded laughter, in the gardens when Marai insisted on teaching them old Concorde games. "You've been pulling away," Elowen said. And I needed to know why. Silence stretched, dense and heavy. At last, Thorn spoke. Because proximity invites loss. She didn't flinch. Your former consort betrayed you, Elowen said, not as an accusation, but as an understanding. But you've never told anyone how deeply. The reactor's hum seemed to swell. Thorn's voice, when it came, was stripped bare. She didn't simply leave. She dismantled my house from within. Fed intelligence to rival factions. Manipulated Concord votes. Nearly cost Mirai her life. Elowen's breath caught. Her ship exploded during a covert extraction, he continued. Sabotaged. I never learned who ensured she didn't escape justice, only that she never returned. He laughed once, bitter and hollow. I built walls after that. Around myself. Around Mirai. Around anything that dared feel real. His hand reached for Elowen's before he seemed to realize it, fingers brushing hers with hesitant reverence. The contact sent a sharp, undeniable spark through them both, less heat than gravity, pulling them closer despite every reason not to. Elowen, he said, voice low, you are standing too close to something dangerous. She stepped closer anyway. So are you. For a moment, the universe narrowed to the space between their breaths. Then the chamber erupted. A shrill alarm shattered the stillness as crimson light flooded the walls. A holographic transmission burst to life midair, encrypted, intercepted, unauthorized. Thorn stiffened. Who authorized? The voice that filled the chamber was unmistakable. Vespera Casimir. The Petrovich clan has expressed interest, the hologram said smoothly. Evidence of Thorn's instability, his inappropriate attachment, his compromised judgment, will strengthen a custody petition for the child. Elowen felt the floor tilt beneath her. Including, Vespera continued, the presence of the outsider. She is useful leverage. The transmission cut. Silence followed, thick, poisonous, final. Elowen stepped back as if struck. She invited me here, she whispered. Not to welcome me, but to provoke this. Her chest burned, old wounds ripping open. Years of being dismissed. Used. Exchanged for convenience. Thorn reached for her. Elowen. She mirrored my family, Elowen said, shaking her head. Smiling while sharpening the knife. Pain flickered across his face, raw, unfiltered. I didn't know. I swear it. I believe you, she said softly. That's what frightens me. Another alarm chimed, this one distant, strategic. Petrovich won't wait, Thorn said grimly. They'll move to legitimize the claim. Elowen's hand drifted to her relic instinctively. Then they can't be allowed to. He looked at her sharply. You know what this means. Yes, she said. No more pretending. He hesitated, then pulled her into him, his forehead resting against hers, breath unsteady. Stay. Fight this with me. Elowen closed her eyes, fear and resolve colliding within her. I will, she said. But not as a pawn. Lightning flared through the reactor conduits as he kissed her, not gentle, not careful, but fierce with urgency, a vow forged in desperation rather than comfort. It was the kiss of two people choosing risk over safety, truth over silence. When they parted, the chamber felt altered, as if the asteroid itself had shifted course. War is coming, Thorn said quietly. Elowen met his gaze, unflinching. Then let it come. Above them, Aegis Prime drifted on, no longer merely a fortress, but the crucible where alliances would be tested, love would be weaponized, and fate itself would be forced to answer. Shadows stretched unnaturally long across Ebonreach, as though the asteroid itself recoiled from the judgment descending upon it. The custody petition from the Petrovich clan did not arrive with drama or spectacle. It came instead with a cold precision of law, transmitted through sealed Concord channels, stamped with authority so ancient it felt immutable. A child, the decree implied, was not a matter of love, but of leverage. The language was clinical, merciless. Emotional volatility. Compromised judgment. Unsuitable domestic environment. Marai's name appeared again and again, reduced to an asset under dispute. Thorne stood motionless in the command rotunda as the final clauses scrolled past the holodisplay, each word carving deeper than the last. The petition demanded immediate relocation of his ward to Petrovich territory, a fortified enclave known for its rigid hierarchy and political grooming of heirs. The justification was clear. Under Thorne's care, Marai was allegedly exposed to instability, scandal, and an outsider whose presence exacerbated unresolved psychological fractures. That outsider had a name. Elowen. Vespera's influence threaded through the document like a toxin. Intercepted logs, now confirmed authentic, revealed how she had curated her betrayal with surgical care. She had leaked fragments of Thorne's medical records from years past, selectively edited, stripped of context. A panic episode following his consort's death reframed as a pattern. Grief recast as danger. Worst of all, she had weaponized Elowen's presence, casting her not as a stabilizing force, but as a temptation, a disruption, a reckless indulgence that proved Thorne incapable of restraint. The domes of Ebon Reach dimmed automatically as maintenance systems responded to rising energy draw, casting the habitat into a muted twilight. Artificial skies dulled from cerulean to slate, clouds freezing mid-drift like painted lies. Even the gardens felt subdued, their bioluminescent flora dimming in sympathy. The fortress no longer felt like a sanctuary. It felt like a holding cell. Elowen paced the observatory, bare feet silent against the polished floor, her reflection fracturing across the curved viewport as stars wheeled endlessly beyond. Her auburn hair had come undone entirely, coils slipping from their bindings, echoing the unraveling inside her chest. "How can they do this?" she demanded, voice raw, turning on Thorne. "How can they just take her?" Thorne did not answer immediately. He stood rigid at the glass, hands clasped behind his back so tightly his knuckles had gone white. Dark crescents shadowed his eyes, evidence of nights spent pacing instead of sleeping, listening instead of resting. The man who had once seemed immovable now looked worn thin, as if the vacuum beyond the viewport had begun pulling pieces of him away. "They aren't taking her yet," he said finally. "They're forcing a response." Elowen laughed bitterly. "That's supposed to comfort me?" "It's supposed to buy us time," he replied, though even to his own ears the words sounded hollow. Marai's chambers lay dark at the far end of the habitat ring. She had withdrawn there hours earlier, refusing dinner, clinging to old comforts she hadn't needed in years. The nightmares had returned, violent, tear-soaked wakings that echoed down the corridors, cries Thorne could no longer quiet on his own. Elowen felt them like phantom pains. Nolani's message chimed softly on the console behind them, a warning encoded in diplomatic language but unmistakable in tone. Concord enforcers en route. Observation mandate pending. They were being watched now. Measured. Every moment catalogued for future judgment. And the relic? Elowen asked, her hand instinctively curling around the pendant at her throat. "You said it might hold evidence, precedent, something ancient enough to counter a political claim." Thorne's jaw tightened. "It's sealed. The encryption isn't Concord standard. It's older. Recursive. Whoever built it anticipated interference." "So it's useless," she whispered. "Not useless," he corrected quietly. "Just silent." The relic's faint glow pulsed once, mockingly, as if aware of her frustration. From the far corridor came a measured step, controlled, deliberate. Vespera. She did not enter the observatory fully, lingering at the threshold like a specter who knew she no longer belonged. Her exile to a peripheral suite had not dulled her composure. She wore neutrality like armor. "You're burning bridges unnecessarily," she said calmly. "This can still be salvaged." Thorne turned slowly. "Leave." She lifted her hands. "I came to help." Elowen's laugh was sharp. You came to bargain. Vespera's eyes flicked to her, cool and assessing. Yield to a proper alliance. A sanctioned consort. Public stability. I retract my testimonies. Petrovich withdraws. And Mirai? Elowen demanded. Safe. Educated. Elevated, Vespera replied. Not raised amid scandal. Thorn's voice was iron. Get out. Vespera sighed, disappointment flickering briefly across her features before resolve hardened again. Then prepare to lose her. She left without another word. The silence she left behind was worse than her presence. The confrontation came hours later, beneath the reactor's ceaseless hum. Thorn stood at the railing overlooking the core, shoulders bowed, the glow casting harsh lines across his face. Elowen approached cautiously, exhaustion pressing down on her like gravity. This is my failure, he said before she could speak. My past dragging you into the void. She stiffened. You should leave, he continued, voice breaking. Before they brand you complicit. Before you lose everything because of me. The words struck like a blade. So that's it, she demanded, tears stinging. You decide who stays, who leaves, who matters. I'm trying to protect you. No, she snapped. You're trying to punish yourself. He turned then, anguish naked in his eyes. I cannot lose her again. And you think pushing everyone away will save her? Elowen's voice shattered. I've lived that way. It doesn't work. Silence roared between them. Then came the sound that broke them both. Small. Trembling. Papa. Mirai stood at the corridor's edge, wrapped in her sleep robe, eyes wide with terror. Are they taking me away? Thorn crossed the distance in 2 strides, dropping to his knees, pulling her into his arms. He held her fiercely, but for the first time, there was no certainty in his embrace. Elowen watched from the shadows, heart splitting open. Later, alone in her quarters, she sank onto the edge of the bed, the relic warm against her skin. Outside the viewport, stars drifted, indifferent, eternal. She pressed a hand to her chest, breath shaking. The old fear rose, ancient and familiar. That love, once touched, would always be taken. That belonging was temporary. That she would always be left behind. The darkness deepened, wrapping Ebonreach in its silent gravity. And somewhere beyond the asteroid's hull, fate tightened its grip, pulling them all toward a reckoning none of them could yet escape. From the abyss of Ebonreach's isolation, where silence pressed like vacuum against the soul, the first glimmers of resistance emerged, not from armies or alliances, but from the quiet defiance of a woman who refused to be erased. Elowen had retreated into the archive vaults, the oldest section of the asteroid, where Concord databanks slept beneath layers of forgotten protocols and dust. Here the air was colder, the lights dimmer, the hum of systems reduced to a distant murmur, an echo of a time when truth was preserved not for politics, but for memory. She had been running her fingers over the relic for hours. The artifact rested on a cradle of inert light, its surface etched with interlocking runes that seemed to shift when viewed from different angles. At first, despair had clouded her efforts. The symbols resisted translation, looping back on themselves, recursive and mocking. Each failed attempt had fed the old ache in her chest, the belief that no matter how hard she tried, the universe would always close its doors just as she reached them. But despair, she realized, was a lie that thrived on exhaustion. She straightened slowly, rolling her shoulders back, breathing through the familiar burn behind her eyes. No more, she told herself. I am done shrinking. The breakthrough came not with force, but with memory. Petrovich clan dialects were not part of Concord's standard archives. They were cultural remnants, passed down through bloodlines, preserved in songs, oaths, and legal rituals older than the Concord itself. Elowen remembered fragments, half-heard phrases, tonal shifts, from her years moving between houses that never truly claimed her. Sounds dismissed as archaic, unimportant. Until now. Her hands moved with new purpose, reconfiguring the translation matrix. She overlaid the relic's runes with phonetic equivalents instead of linguistic ones, mapping intent rather than literal meaning. The artifact pulsed. Light spilled across the vault walls as hidden layers unfolded, compressed data packets embedded beneath ceremonial phrasing. Legal transcripts. Custodial precedents. And then, forgery. Her breath caught. There it was. A sequence of altered testimonies, signatures duplicated through biometric echoing, timestamps subtly misaligned. The custody claim wasn't merely aggressive, it was manufactured. Evidence planted. Records edited. And woven through it all like a familiar poison. Vespera. Elowen staggered back, one hand braced against the polished databank, staring at her reflection in its dark surface. She looked wrecked, eyes rimmed red, hair loose and tangled, but beneath the exhaustion, something else burned. Resolve. I see you now, she whispered, to Vespera, to the Petrovich clan, to the fear that had stalked her since childhood. And I'm done letting you decide my ending. Her reflection stared back, steadier than she remembered. Abandonment ends here, Elowen said softly. I choose to fight. She found Thorn in the observatory, standing motionless before a sprawling tactical projection of contested star lanes. The soft glow painted his face in lines of light and shadow, emphasizing the weariness etched deep into his features. Mirai slept against his chest, wrapped in a blanket too large for her, dark lashes resting against flushed cheeks. One small hand clutched his tunic as though even sleep feared separation. Thorn hadn't noticed Elowen's approach. Not until Mirai stirred. Papa, the child murmured, barely audible. Thorn's entire posture shifted, arms tightening instinctively, head bowing protectively. His eyes softened in a way Elowen felt like a privilege to witness. Something inside her steadied. She stepped forward. The relic speaks, Elowen said quietly. Thorn looked up sharply, disbelief flashing before cautious hope took root. What? She crossed the space between them, activating the artifact. The air shimmered as projections unfolded, layered, precise, undeniable. Forged evidence, Elowen explained, voice firm. Custody precedents manipulated. Testimonies altered. And proof that Vespera facilitated it. Thorn stared at the data in stunned silence. You're certain? He asked finally. Elowen met his gaze without wavering. Enough to stake everything on it. Something in Thorn's expression broke, not in despair this time, but in release. He sank into a chair, exhaling a breath that sounded like it had been held for years. I thought love was the weakness, he admitted quietly. That caring made us targets. Elowen knelt beside him, her hand covering his. It makes us human. And right now, it makes us dangerous, to the people who underestimated us. Their eyes locked. The kiss they shared was not born of heat, but of recognition, two fractured souls choosing the same path forward. It was brief, grounding, a promise rather than a demand. When Mirai shifted again, murmuring in her sleep, Thorn rested his forehead against Elowen's. Together, he said. Together, she echoed. The hours that followed were a blur of strategy and solidarity. Nilani arrived through a secured channel, her expression grave but resolute as she reviewed Mirai's medical files. They'll argue emotional instability, she said. I'll counter with documented improvement. Her nightmares have decreased. Her cognitive markers are strong. She's thriving here. Staff long loyal to Thorn stepped forward, caretakers, educators, medtechs, each offering testimony Vespera had never accounted for. Even the fortress itself seemed to respond, systems synchronizing as if Ebonreach had chosen its side. Mirai, perched at the edge of the chamber, listened intently. I want to speak too, she said suddenly. The adults turned. Thorn's instinct was immediate refusal. No. You don't have to carry this. Mirai slid from her seat and stood tall, small but unyielding. They're talking about my life, she said simply. That means I get a voice. Elowen's throat tightened. That's very brave, she said gently. Mirai shrugged. You taught me stories about heroes. They don't hide. Thorn closed his eyes briefly, then nodded. All right, he said hoarsely. We'll do this properly. As Concord Enforcer's arrival warnings echoed faintly through the asteroid, the family gathered in the core chamber, strategies laid out like constellations on a stellar map. Fear still lingered, but it no longer ruled. They were no longer isolated souls clinging to hope. They were a unit. And as Ebenreach prepared to face judgment, something unshakable settled into place. The certainty that whatever the tribunal decided, the bonds forged here would not be undone. The void had tested them, and they had chosen to shine back. The tribunal chamber aboard the Concorde's neutral arbiter station was designed to intimidate. Its vast crystalline dome arched high above the assembly, transparent enough to reveal the violent ballet of space beyond. Asteroid fields grinding against one another in slow, catastrophic collisions, shards drifting like the remains of ancient wars. Beyond them, enforcer vessels patrolled in deliberate formations, their hulls gleaming, a silent reminder that Concorde law was not a suggestion. This was where destinies were dismantled. At the chamber's apex sat Sir Zoltan Vassar, magistrate of the High Concorde, enthroned upon fused crystal that refracted light into fractured rainbows across his weathered face. His expression betrayed nothing. Centuries of arbitration had honed him into something closer to a force of nature than a man. Below him, the chamber divided cleanly. To the left, the Petrovich delegation, armored in ceremonial regalia, their sigils etched in gold and obsidian, faces cold with inherited entitlement. They stood confident, too confident, already imagining victory. To the right, Thorn Casimir. The Archduke's posture was unyielding, broad shoulders squared, jaw set like stone. He wore no ceremonial armor, no ostentatious display of rank, only the dark, restrained attire of one who trusted substance over spectacle. Beside him stood Elowen. Her auburn hair was braided simply, her gown elegant but understated, its deep hue catching the light like embers beneath ash. She radiated calm, not the fragile composure of someone hoping to survive scrutiny, but the steady presence of someone who had already decided she would not be erased. Between them stood Mirai. Small. Still. Her hand clutched in both of theirs. A family, by choice, not blood, facing a galaxy that would happily tear them apart. Above, the gallery buzzed as holographic journalists activated transmission arrays, broadcasting the tribunal across sectors. Every word spoken here would ripple outward, shaping opinion, alliances, history. Sir Zoltan raised a hand. The custody petition brought forth by the Petrovich clan against Archduke Thorn Casimir is now in session, he intoned. Proceed. The Petrovich assault was swift and merciless. Their lead emissary stepped forward, voice smooth as polished steel. Archduke Casimir's prolonged isolation constitutes neglect. His household lacks stability, oversight, and, most critically, appropriate moral influence. A series of hollow feeds flickered to life, isolated corridors of Ebenreach, selectively edited medical logs, moments stripped of context. Elowen of no fixed noble standing, the emissary continued, has inserted herself into this volatile environment, exacerbating existing psychological fractures. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Vespera, seated behind them, dabbed her eyes theatrically. Witness after witness followed. A former courtier described Thorn as emotionally erratic. A paid steward implied disorder where there was none. Each testimony stacked like debris, forming a narrative designed not to seek truth, but to bury it. Then came Sir Haroldan Kale. He strode forward with barely concealed satisfaction, eyes locking onto Elowen with old resentment. This woman, he spat, is a disruptor. I warned the Concorde years ago. She undermines noble order wherever she goes. Elowen did not flinch. Haroldan's words dripped with venom as he recounted fabricated encounters, exaggerating chaos, painting compassion as manipulation. The Earl of Vortrex followed, reinforcing the lie, claiming a visit to Ebenreach that had never occurred, describing disorder with rehearsed precision. The stakes tightened like a noose. If the tribunal accepted this version of events, Mirai would be removed immediately, escorted to Petrovich territory, molded into a political asset, her chosen family reduced to a cautionary tale. Sir Zoltan's gaze shifted. The defense may respond. Thorn's solicitor rose first, measured and unshaken. One by one, staff testimonies dismantled the accusations, caretakers speaking of routines, educators describing Mirai's progress, security logs proving fabricated visits impossible. Then Nalani took the stand. Her voice was clinical, her data irrefutable. Mirai Casimir's psychological markers show consistent improvement. Reduced night terrors. Increased cognitive resilience. Emotional stability directly correlated with the presence of her guardians. She paused deliberately. Removal would constitute harm. The chamber stirred. Sir Zoltan leaned forward. "Elowen of Ebonreach," he said. "You may testify." Elowen stepped into the light. Cross-examination came swiftly, sharp questions, insinuations, attempts to provoke cracks. "You benefit from proximity to power, do you not? You position yourself as indispensable. You stand to gain security." Elowen met each attack without wavering. "I aided a child in distress," she said clearly. "Not for advantage. For humanity." Then she activated the relic. The chamber gasped as projections erupted, forged documents, altered timestamps, duplicated biometric seals. "Petrovich evidence has been manipulated," Elowen continued. "These records show coordinated fabrication." Sir Zoltan's gaze snapped to the emissaries. Vespera went pale. Enforcers shifted, hands moving subtly toward restraint protocols. Then Sir Zoltan did something unexpected. He looked down, not at Thorn, but at Mirai. "Young one," he said gently, "do you wish to speak?" The chamber froze. Mirai stepped forward. "My papa loves me," she said softly. "He counts stars with me when I can't sleep. He changed the halls so I wouldn't be scared." She turned to Elowen. "She makes us whole." Silence fell, total, reverent. Sir Zoltan closed his eyes briefly. "The petition fails," he declared. "This family endures." The ruling echoed like a supernova. Petrovich delegates withdrew in disgrace. Vespera was escorted out, banished, stripped of influence. Cheers erupted. Thorn dropped to one knee, pulling Mirai into his arms. Elowen's breath finally broke as relief surged, overwhelming and luminous. Thorn rose and drew Elowen close, their kiss sealing not conquest, but survival. Among the stars, they had chosen each other, and the galaxy had been forced to listen. In the wake of the tribunal's verdict, Ebonreach changed. Not overnight, healing never did, but steadily, unmistakably, as though the asteroid itself had been holding its breath and finally allowed the air back in. Energy fields were recalibrated, domes relit, gardens coaxed into fuller bloom. The once muted artificial skies brightened into layered hues of sapphire and gold, their radiance mirroring the renewal taking root within its people. Where there had once been tension, there was rhythm. Where silence had lingered, there was laughter. Where fear had ruled, there was now intention. Ebonreach was no longer a fortress bracing for attack. It had become a home. 8 cycles later, the Vortex Gala returned, an event spoken of in hushed awe across sectors. Held within a spiraling convergence of light and gravity, the gala unfolded beneath cascading holographic auroras that shimmered like living constellations. Delegates from rival systems mingled freely, alliances forged not from coercion but from respect earned the hard way. At the heart of it all stood Elowen Sariel Casimir. She no longer wore borrowed identities. Her gown flowed like liquid starlight, woven with fine threads of ancient alloy, material once embedded within the relic that had changed everything. The metal caught the light subtly, not ostentatious, but unyielding. A symbol, for those who understood, unity forged through truth, not display. Beside her stood Thorn. Time had gentled him, not by dulling his strength, but by softening its edges. His posture remained commanding, yet there was ease in the way he leaned slightly toward Elowen, as though the universe itself had rebalanced around her presence. They were not performing partnership. They were inhabiting it. Across the dance floor, Mirai moved with quiet confidence, 14 now, her obsidian eyes bright with self-possession. She danced with the son of a foreign envoy, not out of obligation but choice, her laughter light, unburdened by the shadows that once stalked her sleep. Elowen watched her with a softness that still surprised her. Nearby, Cairo and Lyrian, twin whirlwinds of mischief, raced each other beneath floating light streams, while Selene, younger but no less determined, chased after them with fierce joy. Nalani observed from a respectful distance, her smile proud and protective, ever the guardian even in celebration. This was the future they had fought for. The echoes of old conflicts had not vanished entirely, but they no longer dictated the present. Vespera, stripped of her leverage and illusions, had retreated to a distant colony. No dramatic downfall, no vengeance, only obscurity. Her influence dissolved quietly, undone not by punishment, but irrelevance. Thorn rebuilt alliances slowly, deliberately. No rushed treaties. No forced loyalty. Each bond tested, each promise mutual. House Casimir rose in stature not through dominance, but integrity. Elowen's relic, once a burden she feared would isolate her further, became a bridge instead. Its ancient languages unlocked dormant trade pacts and cultural accords long abandoned, restoring pathways between systems that had forgotten how to speak to one another. From that work grew something unexpected. A linguistic academy, founded on Ebonreach, where overlooked minds were welcomed, where forgotten dialects were preserved, where no one was dismissed for standing between worlds. Elowen walked its halls often, listening more than she spoke, finally belonging not because she had earned permission, but because she had built space. Her wound of isolation healed not by disappearance, but by purpose. At the edge of the gala, beneath a quieter arc of stars, Thorn turned to her. From his palm emerged a pendant, small, elegant, its core pulsing faintly with stellar resonance. "For you," he said softly. Elowen's breath caught as she recognized the pattern etched within it, a constellation only they knew, mapped during nights spent counting stars with Mirai when sleep refused to come. "You mended what I thought irreparable," Thorn continued, voice low and steady. "Our family. My heart." Elowen reached for him without hesitation, their foreheads resting together as the galaxy moved on around them. Their kiss was unhurried. Certain. Not born of desperation, but of knowing. From guarded strangers, to chosen partners, to architects of something lasting. Mirai approached then, eyes shining. "Mama." "Papa," she said, voice clear and sure. "We're unbreakable now." Elowen knelt, drawing her into an embrace, Thorn's hand resting on Mirai's shoulder, 3 orbits aligned at last. Above them, the auroras shifted, spilling light across the dome in patterns that resembled wings. The void had tested them. Love had answered. And in the vastness of space, they had built something rare. A constellation that would endure. If this ending resonated, if it reminded you that healing is possible, that chosen family can redefine destiny, stay with us. More stories await, where courage meets hope, and even the darkest voids learn to shine.